Hi there, it's Denise Eckert, and I love coming on here and sharing different ideas and techniques to help you create a happier lifestyle. And today I've got Trixi Menhardt, and she's a mental fitness and leadership coach with deep business background in medical devices, healthcare IT, and life sciences, leading large-scale sales and technical projects internationally. Now, since 2012, as a professional certified coach, she focuses on mental wellness, navigating uncertainty, and bringing joy and success to both emerging established leaders through corporate sponsored coaching. Now, in her private practice, Trixi's focus are people who are high achieving parents of young adults who have not turned out the way they hoped for. Outwardly successful people are at a loss on how to connect with their young adult kids, Gen Zers, who are making very different choices in life. So Trixi helps her clients become the parent they want to be, redefining their role from provider to mentor, building trust with their beloved child, and along the way, learn techniques to ring in their anxiety and open up a path for effective action. Trixi is a PCC through the International Coaching Federation and certified mental fitness coach through Positive Intelligent. Welcome, Trixi.
Welcome, Denise. Thanks for having me.
Now, what inspired you to do this type of work? Because I know a lot of us are at that age where, yes, our children are different than what we thought they could be.
Well, I'm a mother of two, so my kids are in their 20s, so I've been there. And the reason I was inspired to do this work is that out of my corporate sponsored coaching, people would typically start working with me on getting promoted, being better, less stressed, blah, blah, blah. And at some point, after we had developed a trusting relationship, a lot of them would show up with, well, what's actually really going on in my life is that I worry about my children. And so that was a segue that I realized was coming up more and more. And as my mentor encouraged me to really lean into what is the universe telling me, I'm like, yeah, these are all the people that are showing up in my coaching practice. And then I did some thinking and I talked to friends and family, and this really is the holy grail, because when the kids are little, there's so much advice, right? From books to school psychologists to college counselors, you name it. And then when we're facing this transition into them being young adults, there's very little support. And what I find, that's why I mentioned the high achieving parents. They're so used to getting things done at work and their career and their life. And here they're at a loss. And that loss is really profound. And it's really something that touches my heart.
Now, what do you, as a coach that deals with this issue, what are the issues that the parents have or the disconnect that they have with their children at the moment?
So there's interesting studies. When you ask parents whether they want their kids to be successful or happy, they will choose happiness. But then we know that most people define happiness through success. And again, when we think about the generational divide, my generation really thought that success leads to happiness. It's this idea of, I'll get into that college, I'll get into that job, I'll get into that house. Da, 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 da. And so we have built wealth and influence doing that. But the children are different. And for whatever reason, they're different. They're different. And a lot of these kids don't think that success is meaningful.
Well, and I know for myself, like success was always on the scale of how busy you are.
Yes.
And we went through that. Well, I went through it in my 20s where I kept burning myself out. And I was trying to do that success thing, working 24/7 and just overworking myself. Now, what do you see with parents, how they can support their children?
Well, there's so many things to talk about. First, I would say, let's normalize it. When we look across the fence and we think the neighbors and friends have figured it out and their kids are going to great schools and great jobs, and then there's the posh wedding and all those things, we feel kind of diminished. So I want to encourage everyone to understand that nobody has it figured out. So even outwardly successful parents and their children, on the inside, are they truly happy? I doubt it. So that's really the first step, normalize it. I'm not a loser because my child has chosen a different path. The other area around us is the guilt. Did I do something wrong? Could I have done more, less, and so on? And again, I would say that most parents are doing the best they can. So removing the guilt and the embarrassment, I mean, these are all negative thoughts. These are judgy thoughts, and nothing happens in that space.
Now, are you talking about children that have gotten themselves into trouble? I mean, that's a big thing. I know with a lot of my friends and people I associate with, they might have one child that's doing very well, and the
Yes.
other one is just no. And I mean, how, as a parent, how do you deal with that? And I love what you said because it is a lot of guilt. It puts a lot on the parent because you feel like you've done something wrong, but then you've got one child who's doing amazing, and the other child is just not flourishing or gotten themselves into trouble, whether it be drugs or mental health issues. So, as a parent, what can you do to help your children?
Yeah, yeah. And once again, I encourage parents not to think as one child is successful and the other one is a failure. I know people do that, and that's how they show up in my practice.
Mm-hmm.
But the truth is, they're all our children. And whatever they're doing right now, look at it as this is a temporary stage they're in. So, yes, you might have the extreme case where one child is off to the races and the other child is a drug addict, in and out of rehab, situations like that. But everything can be turned around. And what I can tell parents is it starts now. It's not that looking back, that like what happened and why me and why us, and then projecting that into the future. I think one of the deepest fears parents have, and I'm not excluded from that, is that our children end up on the street. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we see that. I used to live in San Francisco. I go to Orlando here at the beach. People are homeless, 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 homeless. And so we see that. We see that this is where people end up. But they don't have to end up there permanently, and they don't have to end up there ever. But it's just one of these fears. And then when we have all these fears, we don't know what to do. So as a parent, you need to set boundaries. Again, when kids were little, we had guidelines, almost rules on what kind of boundaries are expected. But for young adults, what are those boundaries? I haven't seen a rule book yet.
Yeah. Now, what kind of boundaries are you talking about putting into place with a young adult?
That's very personal. So that's what I work with my clients on. Really define those boundaries that cannot be crossed. And for some parents, that means I'm not going to give you any money. It doesn't matter. You have money in your college fund, but you're not going to college, so that money is not available to you. What does that mean? For other parents, it will be the idea of how long are you allowed to live at home? I mean, that's a big question because kids come bouncing back. Or kids come to us and say, hey, Dad, I'm finally moving out. I found these cool roommates, and oh, I need somebody to co-sign on the lease, right? I am not telling anybody what's right or wrong, but I help people establish their boundaries through a lot of inner work, visualization, looking at who they want to be in the future and looking back into the here and now. These are all techniques where we can come up with boundaries, and then we have to hold them up. Right? Once boundaries become leaky, they're worthless. They're worse than having no boundaries.
Yeah. Now, for a listener that is dealing with a troubled adult child, what are the steps that they can take to make a difference?
I would say take care of yourself first. It's this really cheesy analogy. When you were traveling with a toddler, they told you on the airplane that you have to put on the oxygen mask first. We forget that. We still have to take care of ourselves, because if we are in that heightened anxious state of mind, and I really mean anxious, you wake up in the middle of the night and all these racing thoughts. You get a text from your child and you're like, now what? Or you don't get a text for 7 days. And what does that mean? There's heightened anxiety, and it's almost clinical. I'm not a clinical worker, but it is permanent anxiety. So finding ways to rein in the anxiety. That's definitely the first step, because nothing comes from that place of panic.
Yeah.
And that's really hard for people because we are so, again, going back to this hyperachieving mindset, we're so used to taking control and taking action and doing things, and doing the opposite, slowing down and, oh, what, taking care of myself? That's a really radical concept.
Yeah, it is, especially, yeah, for high achievers. And the thing is that we can't control what our child does. We can't take over their lives. And I see that so often. I just talked to a friend of mine and she's taken over her daughter's life again. You're not doing her any good, but, and she's a super high achiever. It's such a struggle for a lot of parents. I see that where they just want to take over, put them on the right path, and get them going in the direction that they think they need to check the certain boxes. And I've done so many interviews with people where we are expected to check all these boxes at our age that we grew up with. And now we are putting that on our children as well. And yeah, it's a vicious circle, actually. Now, if you could give parents one practical thing to try out right now, what would you say?
I would say stop what you're doing, because obviously it's not working. And aside from working with a professional, a therapist or a coach, I always say when a relationship has totally run out of control, you can't fix it. And the other person can't fix it because you come at it like this. To get started, really stop doing what you're doing right now and reconnecting with that child that you love. I mean, literally, look at their childhood picture, look at the videos, remember their essence, because whoever they are now, they were like that when they were 2, 3, 5 years old. And the qualities that they had then, for example, a really strong-minded child. When they were little, that was cute. They were the go-getters. They were the ones that were the captains of the little soccer league. How does that show up now? Chances are that in order for them to survive, they've become very controlling. And that controlling habit can show up with, I don't want you ever to talk to me about anything. I don't want you in my life. So there's a lot of connections here, and I'm wandering off. But the question about what you can do now is stop and look at the essence of that person that you love.
And that just brings you back into that love. So for you being a coach, how do you work with people since you're not clinical? Do you recommend going to a therapist or a mediator?
I always recommend that you, the parent, who is interested in doing the work, does the work. Now, if your spouse is interested in doing the work, great, but in many cases, it's only one parent. So just recognize that it starts here. It starts with us. So if I want to do the work, I can choose if I want to work with a therapist or a coach. Now, again, there is significant differences between a coach and a therapist. What I do is I work on the here and now. As I said, I don't dwell on the past. We need to talk about the past, but we can't change it, and we're not going to get great insights into why things are the way we are. So if you're interested in moving forward, that's when you work with a coach. A therapist really deals with things that you're kind of stuck in. So do the work yourself. I do specifically is I started with self-care. I put people through a 6-week app-based mental fitness program. It's just the idea. If you want to run a marathon, you don't just lace up and go in the race. You do maybe a couch to 5K first. And that's exactly the same with mental fitness. If you want to get better, because what you have right now is not working. I mean, there's lots of other things that we will work on eventually, how to open up the dialogue with your child. But I don't recommend doing that now because you're the two same people that have this problem. Something needs to change. A lot of young adults have therapists or coaches. Again, it's very helpful if your child has their own world. The two of you need to do their own work, and then you can come together.
Yeah, that's powerful. Can you share your most challenging client situation?
All right, so challenging maybe as coaches, we don't get our clients' disease. It's like you're an emergency room worker, you have to be able to walk away from it. Okay, so, but the stories do stick with us. Yes. I think the most challenging situation is when one parent has a big disconnect with their spouse, the other parent. I think one of the most touching situations there was when a client's son was homosexual, had come out of the closet. And one parent, well, it's not what they wanted. They connected with the child, and the other parent could not. And of course, I was doing the work with the parent that had connected with the child and wanted to make it all better. So I think that was the most challenging situation because I felt like there was this gap opening up between the couple. And we talked about that in our coaching sessions, that you can only control who you are. So if you decide that's the parent you want to be, you can support your child. You cannot control the thoughts and value system your partner operates in. So I think that is the most challenging situation when that value system was separate, no matter what. And all of a sudden it's wide out in the open because of what's going on with their child. Yeah. So that's kind of like is it the secondary or the primary presenting issue? The relationship with your spouse. It often comes into play.
Well, in that situation too, there would be other family members as well involved, whether there's a grandparents involved or brothers and sisters involved. Because I know a lot of times with families, people tend to take sides and support certain people, and then it becomes split down the middle of who you want to talk to, and it gets very complicated, actually.
Yes, it becomes very complicated. And the people in the middle, they're embarrassed. They refuse to go to family reunions. There's issues with Christmas cards. I mean, it goes the whole spectrum of family relationships. Yeah. So again, what happens in that situation is it's normal. You're not the only one who's going through this. You haven't done anything wrong. There's no reason to be guilty or embarrassed.
Yeah, it's funny. I grew up in a very European household, and for us, we were put against other children, and this person's doing this, and you should be doing that. And it was a huge disconnect for me because when I was younger, and even my sister, we disconnected from our parents to become who we wanted to become. And then later in life, we did reconnect, but there was all that missed time. And I lost my dad very young. So I had many years where I didn't speak. And I love what you're doing is to bring people back together, to work together, rather than sit there and judge each other. And that's the big thing.
I mean, that's amazing that you bring that up, Denise. I had so much of that happening in my family. I mean, I didn't know my maternal grandmother until I was a teenager because the two of them, my mom and her, weren't talking.
Yeah.
And there's so many other examples of people that have cut each other off because it just became too much. And as you said, it's really hard to get those years back, particularly if you don't talk about it. If you come back and you just want to make amends, there's work to be done.
So our audience here, we have a lot of high achieving women who basically get it together. They've run their own businesses or they have great corporate jobs. So what can they do to increase the success of their relationship with their children? What skills are transferable to becoming that parent that opens that door?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that question, Denise, because I think that is an important bridge that most people don't see when they initially come to me with this situation. They are really good leaders, even if they have tendency of being controlling. They have learned through years and years and years of practice and training, in order for their team to be successful, they need to let them fly. They need to have them make their own mistakes. You're there to support them, to mentor them. As a manager, we all know it's your role to elevate your team to the point where they don't need you anymore. So just take that thought and apply it to your children. It's really about letting go of control. So I'm pretty sure that most of your listeners have learned to do that, because that's why they're in leadership positions. If they can use that same paradigm to themselves as a parent, letting go. You're not the educator anymore. You're not the person that makes their lunch boxes, but you can be there to mentor them, to listen. And we know that in our careers, if we're a good listener, hey, it's the simplest tool I can give any aspiring executive. Stop giving advice, just listen. Right? So can you listen to your children? Now, again, if things are really hot and steamy right now, that will take some time for any young adult to get used to. Like, mom, dad, who are you? You're listening, you're curious. Just try it out. Just be playful with it. Take it home. See what it will be like to listen and not give advice. And I will never forget my own son when he was a teenager, and it was an autopilot. He came home with a situation, and I said, "Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa! I think this is what you should do." And I got all carried away, and he looked me in the eye. He said, "Mom, did I ask you for your advice?" And I said, "No." And I was ready to continue my advice, and he saw me open my mouth, and he said, "So, why are you giving me advice?" I will never forget that. There's so much we can learn from our children when we listen. I had a conversation with my daughter who has anxiety attacks. And I said, you know what? That really scares me when that happens. I don't know who I should be. Like, who do you want me to be in that moment? And she took a pause and she said, don't ask me questions. I said, why? Why? She said, because if you ask me questions, it becomes bigger and bigger. So those are some examples of where our kids have the answers, right? Or just go on TikTok. It's not even YouTube anymore. Go on TikTok and listen to Gen Zers. Listen to what's going on in their head. It's pretty impressive. It's a
Yeah.
lot that's going on in their head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry for that long answer, but I think
No.
it's really important for people to know that they already have the tools and they can bring them home.
And that's the coaching philosophy, is that I know I'm a coach myself, but the philosophy is that your client has their own answers. It's not you telling them what to do. And as a high achiever or someone who gets stuff done, we tend to need to take control to get things done the way we want it done.
Yes, yes. Yeah.
So I understand you have a free discovery workshop. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yes, so the methodology that I use is called the Positive Intelligent Mental Fitness Gym. And as a precursor to enrolling in that program, you take a saboteur assessment, and that's like a 10-minute online assessment. It's free, and it pinpoints your top saboteurs. So we have this master judge that says, you're stupid, that person is ignorant, this situation is dire. So, but who are these voices? And these voices are talked about the hyperachiever that says, I'll be happy when, always on to the next thing. One of the saboteurs is the pleaser, that as parents, if we're very pleasing, we can't set boundaries because we want to be liked by our children. So there's 9 of these characters, and what people can do is I'll send them to the assessment, and then they get a free debrief with me. And that's about 20-30 minutes talking about their top saboteurs and understanding how they limit their potential, how they're holding them back. So saboteurs are original strengths that have run out of control. If I'm an achiever, great. If I become a hyperachiever, it's running the show. So in the 30 minutes, we talk about how that is applicable to their own life, at work, relationship with their children. And then we'll chat a little bit about what it's like to coach with me. But this is not a sales call. This is a free gift. Afterwards, if you never want to talk to me again, that's great, because what you see in that conversation, you will never forget. It's like the idea of once you see a red car and something happens with that red car, you will always see a red car. So you will be able to work with your saboteurs and see how they're running the show and what are some good antidotes to work with them, not against them. They will never go away, but they can be with us and they can support us rather than distracting us. So that's my free office, the Saboteur Discovery Workshop.
Okay, well, that sounds amazing. So for anybody who's listening, I will have the link wherever you're watching or listening to that. Now, Trixi, we're going to be wrapping this up. What are your final words of wisdom for the audience today?
That's always the question I ask my clients at the end of the session.
Tables turned.
Thanks for putting me on the spot, Denise. You're not alone in this. It's worth putting the work in. These are your children. Don't believe that you can fix that on your own, because how has that worked out for now? Don't expect that you need your spouse to be part of the game. It's you who does the work, you and your child. And it's not rocket science. It takes a few months to get better. That's all there is. Of course, it's going to be lifelong practice to keep your mental fitness up. But applying it to the specific relationship with your child, that's a few months of work to be able to go in and be empathetic, curious, navigating the situation.
Wow, thank you. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And if anybody has any questions, as I said, her information will be wherever you're watching or listening to this. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and ask Trixi questions. So thank you so much for today, Trixi. And now I'm giving you a gentle reminder to slow down and enjoy life, and I'll see you in the next episode.